She's right up here with us now. Before the focus comes on us, give her a little focus. If we could have 400 people singing her happy birthday. Her name is Jordan. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jordan. Happy birthday to you. Here's a little Princess Peach crown and a pink birthday princess sash. It's all your birthday. So it's awesome.
And now we all know it. We learned psychology and not music.
You're right, yeah, exactly. Thanks again for coming. Welcome to the Games Are Good For You talk. My name is Dr. Patrick O'Connor, and my doctorate's in clinical psychology. My Twitter handle is Comicspedia, and if you want to follow me, my background, as I mentioned, clinical psych, and currently I teach. I'm a psychology professor at a couple different schools, which you'll find out about very briefly later on.
Hello, I'm Dr. Kelly Dunlap. I'm also a doctorate of clinical psychology, and I graduated with a doctorate last December, so I'm a newly minted doctor, and so when you do after you graduate with 5 years into your doctorate, you go get another master's. I'm currently a master's student in game design and persuasive play.
Overachiever. My name is Sean Knuth, and I am a forensic psychologist, and I am in practice in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Alright, so that's us. So we figured we'd just start off the panel by looking at this really cute piece of broccoli. And the title of this panel is Games Are Good For You. And by having a panel at PAX entitled Games Are Good For You, that somehow implies that this is a novel concept, that this is an interesting idea, because there are no panels about how broccoli is good for you. There are no panels on how reading is good for you, because we just assume those things. So the idea that games can be good for you, we might all believe it. There's something about that topic that is interesting to us because it's not the norm. So it's important to look at games themselves throughout history. So we, as humans, have been playing games forever. Like pretty much since we could stand upright, we've been playing games. So board games, that you see there, an early handball or basketball type version. Chess is one of the oldest games known to man. So we've been playing for all these times, and games have a deep psychological component to them. They help us through hard times. They help us build friendships. They help us build relationships. And it's really important because we used to really celebrate games. And this is an Olympic ceremony from way back in the day. And somehow, in the past, 2 millennia or more, or so, probably more than 2. Also did not start with math either, obviously. We went from celebrating games as the pinnacle of human achievement to this. To demonizing them. To drawing a parallel between all of these people here and they all play video games and they all do something really bad. When I see it, they're all dudes. So maybe it's that. All of them are white dudes. Okay. So it's important to understand some basic human psychology and that we suck at things when things change. We hate change of any kind. This is a lovely notice saying don't buy Negro records. Because scary and it'll take away your children and steal their souls. Here's some times in the 1950s when we burned all the comic books because they were evil and they were destroying our children. And then there's, of course, the devil's music, rock and roll. I don't know if you've read it, but to eternal damnation in the fiery depths of hell.
Just real quick, exotic voodoo rhythm. Awesome.
And then, of course, Dungeons and Dragons. Harmless fun. Dungeons and Dragons were put on trial in the 80s because it was witchcraft, it was sorcery, it was anti-Christian, it was taking our children and converting them to paganism. It was evil. So then there came the pinball machine, which is really where the story of video games and the kind of backlash against video games and seeing video games not inherently as good comes from. So this is one of the very first pinball machines, and it was called Ballyhoo. And it's using 1932. And you would put a coin in or so, and you would pull the trigger, and little balls would come out, and they would fall into these pockets. Like, hey! Kind of like Plinko way back in the day. Now, what happened is that this was seen as gambling. And gambling in the 1930s was a no-no. I mean, it's still kind of frowned upon. But this was seen as gambling targeted specifically at children, and therefore it should be banned. And in fact, pinball machines were banned in certain places, including New York City, for almost 40 years, between 1932 and into the 1970s. There's actual pictures of Mayor LaGuardia taking a sledgehammer to pinball machines because they were evil and they were corrupting our children. So this was, yeah, I mean, like you do. So this is really where it starts. And then it moves, oh, this is another one. This is in, I think, Better Homes and Gardens, talking about pinballs. And so pinball business isn't child's play. When you zoom in, let's see here, act now, keep your child from being victimized. And if you read down below, it talks about a father, how his kids went to a life of crime, but they were from a good family. It's because they played pinball. So, you know. So pinball gave way to video game arcades. And there used to be a time when they were all pinball, and then there was a time they were side by side with what we think now as video games, and then video games kind of took over. And that's, unfortunately, the legacy that came with pinball, that came out of gambling, just kind of continued on down the road to include video games. And there's some really great footage on YouTube, and we don't have time for this panel, but if you look it up, there is somebody online who has, of course on YouTube, a clip from like 1982 of a woman there standing, interviewing a child playing, or not a child, an adolescent, playing, I think it was Donkey Kong or something, no, Mortal Kombat, and asked, well, why are you playing? And he's like, yeah, children can stand for 2 hours playing a game. And it's like, ooh, it's this really scary thing. Of course, so that came out, and then the really big thing that kind of kicked off the modern view of video games are dangerous was Mortal Kombat, so thank you, Mortal Kombat. Because at the time, the biggest retailer for video games was Toys R Us. So video games were really seen as a child's pastime. And the idea of having Mortal Kombat sold next to Mario really distressed people. And again, this is this change of any kind thing. We hate change of any kind. It's a very human thing. And this is kind of where we platform off, and this is where we get the whole, you know, Columbine shooters play Doom, and Adam Lanza and all of them, they play video games, they play Call of Duty. It can all be traced back to, well, I don't want to let them all play Mortal Kombat, but this was kind of the launching point for video games to get that bad rap, or continue to have that bad rap that pinball had, that gambling had, and so on and so forth. No, why don't we just switch seats?
Switch seats? Fantastic.
Musical panel chair.
Alright, so, as I mentioned, my name is National Connor, and I'm a psychology professor at 2 different schools, Calvin Page and the Chicago School, which I realize is bad place we can't read it. So, one's a community college, that's Calvin DuPage, the other is a graduate school for a clinical psych, and what I do there is I try to bring video games, whether it's actually playing video games or video game research into what I teach. Because I think on the one hand, a lot of gamers, of course, or I should say a lot of students are gamers already, and so I want to bring in something they're familiar with, and that helps at the community college. And at the graduate school, I think it's important that tomorrow's psychologists and therapists be up to date on what research says about video game play, not just to fall into the trap that a lot of other people do of just believing kind of what may be portrayed in the media of violent video games are going to cause your kids to become the devil. So that's a bit about kind of my background, what I do. So I want to talk about a group that Sean and I ran when we worked together. We call it Gamers United, Social Skills Through Gaming. And I want to zoom in on something. Essentially what we would do is, it was an 8-week group therapy group, where we would play, we had this kind of rule, like every time we met, we had to play a game of some kind. And we would try to play a video game or a tabletop game, a card game, something like that. But it was always in the design would be to help kids ages 9 to 12 and 13 to 16 develop social skills. And some of those things to kind of focus on being a gracious loser and a humble winner, cooperative play, how to recognize too much gaming, things like that. So some things parents were already concerned about, but also like, hey, it'd be cool if my kid could be better at this thing. So that's kind of what we would focus on. And I want to tell you a little bit about how we did that with our group. So one of the earlier things that we would do with these kids is we did this sort of gaming personality survey. There's no research necessarily on this, but we kind of designed it just to get kids connected with this idea that we all play games differently at different times. So you might want to be the star of the show sometimes. Other times maybe you want to be helpful to other people. Other times maybe you want to just kind of play by yourself. Other times you want to kind of like gather information and then make this kind of like calculated strike. So it's just a brief little questionnaire, and then we'd score it in Excel. And it's maybe a little tougher to see, but as we would score it, some of the roles that we kind of came up with would, one would emerge usually as kind of the dominant one. And what the 5 kind of gaming personalities that we arrived at were kind of like a tank class, we call it the defender, of course a mage class, there was a support or kind of like healer personality type, scout, and fighter. And again, the whole purpose of this was getting kids familiar with the idea that you may always like playing the sniper in some shooter, but there's certainly going to be value in sometimes being a support class, being a healer, and being helpful with one another, because the kids pretty quickly and easily would catch on to the idea of, a team of 5 snipers wouldn't be very helpful, just as a team of 5 healers wouldn't be very helpful, a team of 5 tanks. But if we have one from each class, then that really brings together that kind of cohesive nature, and we can really work together to overcome the game mechanics. So that was kind of one thing. And I want to tell you about an activity that we did in the group 2 called Controllers Down. I love this because we got to play Mario Kart. So we were bringing Mario Kart, and this was something we wanted to do to help build what we call frustration tolerance. So when you get frustrated from like losing or something like not going your way, some people kind of melt down and really have a hard time with it, and other people, though, they can kind of tolerate it and say, I'm going to bounce right back and get it. So what happens if you get a bunch of kids together that maybe fall more into the first camp of melting down and I can't do this? So what can be helpful but also sound a bit mean is to put them through a trial where essentially they would have to like repeatedly lose almost. So what we would do is, the kids would play Mario Kart, and at a random point while they're racing, 4 kids of course at a time, I would say controllers down. And you'd have to take your controller and just put it on the table, take your hands off without pausing. So you're watching racers kind of go by you, and you're like, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, So you're seeing all this happen, and the kids would, and after just a second or two, just not too long, I'd say, all right, controllers up. They pick it up and they start racing again. And then I'd kind of watch lap 2, be like, controllers down, put it down again, and right? And they're watching like go passing by, like controllers up. So then they go, oh my god, right back. We even did a sort of like team-based thing where some kid would be like in first, and they put controllers down, then someone else would come in, and then they would get like,
they'd have to get the controller off.
So they'd have like a teammate, so it'd be like controllers down, and then when if I'm done with it, then Sean would pick it up, and then he would resume the same racer, and then he would put it down, then I would pick it up. So we kind of like worked with it from different angles. And this would open a conversation around how much again, frustration tolerance, essentially, how difficult is it to feel that anxiety of racers passing you by. But then we also did this other thing where I would give them a warning. So instead of just saying controllers down, I would say 30 seconds until controllers down, 20 seconds, 10 seconds, 5 seconds, and then controllers down. That opened up a conversation of, there are times when we just want to rip the Band-Aid off. So if you tell me, if a parent is telling their child, it's time to go to dinner, we need to leave, some kids prefer that. Some kids really just tell me it's time to go and I can turn my game off and we're good to go. Just rip it off like a Band-Aid. Other kids really appreciate having that advance warning. They want to get to a safe state, they want to get to a good point, they want to kind of plan for things. And that's what some of the kids would talk about. Their feedback would be, I would kind of get my power up and I'd wait for it to arrive, and as the time was counting down, when I would pick it back up from controllers down, I could then use my power up, my mushroom or whatever, and get right back into things. So they could talk about planning ahead or just get it over with, do the Band-Aid approach. So this was something we did again with the kids to bring games into developing social skills. And
just one real quick, another thing that we would do is we would send home with the kids like a report. This is what your kid did, and with the description of the activities, and we would communicate to the parents, look how much happier your kid is stopping playing a game if you give them this warning, if you give them the 30 seconds, the 20 seconds, the 10 seconds. If you're having a hard time getting your kid to stop gaming, maybe because you're not giving enough time, maybe you need to give them a warning ahead of time, help them learn time management rather than just expecting them to drop it. I don't know.
Exactly. And I wanted to mention a piece of research I think was really interesting that really kind of highlights why we were doing this and what we're kind of driving at was that fathers who become involved in family leisure activity, basically dads who play with their kids, end up having all of these benefits emerge of the family being more cohesive or working together better on solving problems, to develop a greater happiness, trust and support. Basically, as long as the dad is involved in the positive side of things, playing games with your kids, you see all these mental health benefits emerge. And so, yeah, with those feedback sheets, we try to open that conversation with parents of play these games with your kids. This is what they learned today, and really connect with them. Take them to a game store, ask them what their favorite games are. Get familiar with them so that you can join them in that experience too.
Yeah, no, I can sit there. I got long arms. I'm good.
Fantastic.
So let me talk first about presentation order. So there were 4 of us, our 4th is sick, but I was last to go to put my slides on, and you can see that I had to take the longest, most annoying path to get to the end, down the visual path. My path goes by the robot from Zaxxon, and then I think this is the pterodactyl from Joust, so clearly a little bit the short end of the stick or the long end of the maze, I guess. All right, so I'm a forensic psychologist, and forensic psychologist, I think, is one of the coolest job titles we have. Who here has seen Criminal Minds? Familiar with that, right? How about CSI? What I do is nothing like them. What I do is I work with individuals who have done not good things, and part of what I do is I evaluate them and generate reports on their risk of perhaps committing violence again in the future. And my reports go into a courtroom, and I go into a courtroom, and there are very highly paid lawyers with experts that try to tear my report apart. And so it is important that I know research and I know what to look for and I know how to back up what I am claiming in my reports. And the reason I bring this up is because I absolutely never, ever bothered to ask if they play video games or violent video games. The research out there in support of the claim that video games make us more violent, there's barely any of it, and that's a whole other discussion. That I know what the research says, I know how to represent it, and video games aren't something I ever bother asking about. I mean, I ask, just so we have something to talk about, but I don't claim that, oh, like with video games, he's probably going to be more violent. Oh, and there's the dot I should have been on. So this is a picture of me when I was young, before I developed my awesome gaming physique. I was still growing into it, but you'll see I'm playing Ultima 3 there. You see a little honk book on the corner. That's right, respect the honk. I started playing Ultima 3 because my family got this computer, and I came downstairs one day and my dad was playing it, and I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. So I sat and I watched him, and growing up, my dad and I played computer games. I mean, this was before we played computer games versus each other for the most part. But we played the same games. We talked about games. Not a whole lot else in common, but this is something that we did. Something we did together. And looking back, I mean, obviously part of the reason that I love what I love is because it's a shared activity I have with my dad. Now, I'm a father. This is my daughter. And her name is Rosalind, and one of the first things I bought for her was this new onesie. And I also bought her a companion cute onesie. And I love video games, and I fully expect that she is probably going to have some sort of affinity for video games too, because her mom's as big a nerd as her dad is. But here's the thing that I need to keep in mind as her father is she is going to develop interests that I have no interest in. That is how it's going to work. And my job as a dad is to teach her about my interests, but my job as a dad is also to develop an interest in her interests. That's what we need to do. to 20 concerned moms at a time. That's just usually who comes, dads don't come. Because they want to know about video games. They don't know how to deal with them, what to do with them. And so this is the opposite crowd that I'm used to giving this talk to. And so when Patrick asked me to be part of this panel, I thought, what do we need to do now that we have a chance to sit down with all these people who are clearly very enthusiastic about video games? What's the best thing we can do? And what I thought is, I want to essentially deputize you guys to go out and have conversations with parents who don't understand video games. I want to give you the knowledge that you need that maybe you can convince them to become more involved in gaming in their kids' lives. One of the ways you can do that is to be a good consumer of information and to critically evaluate claims that you hear. And here's my quiz. So, it's a trick question. The answer is all. You can die from drinking too much water. There is an appropriate amount of heroin or opioids to exist in your life if you go in for surgery. Thank goodness for the poppy, right? Too much exercise can be bad for you. Too much school can be bad for you.
I don't know what you're talking
The point that I want to make with this is, if you see a claim that too much of something is bad, of course, that's inherent in the phrase too much. Too much of something, of course it's bad. That by definition is too much. Because the fact of the matter is, there is absolutely nothing inherently good about video games. And there is nothing inherently bad about video games either. Just like all of those 6 things, and many, many other things, it's how you use it. What's an appropriate amount of video games for me is not going to be the same for you, it's not going to be for your friends, it's not going to be for your friends' kids, or your, whatever, you know what I mean. What games do is they help us connect with each other, and they help parents, or they can help parents connect with kids. The kids out there who have parents that don't understand video games, they need our help to how to mesh up with their kids, to how to better interact with them. They need help learning how to do this, and this is what I want you guys to go do. And this is a great idea that I came up with that I sold to a mom, and she loves it. I don't know that her child particularly is fond of it, but if your child's bugging you for a game, and it's not their birthday and it's not Christmas, have them write a book report on it. Have them write why they want it, why it's good. What mom wouldn't want that? What parent wouldn't want that? And then the kid's happy because it's like getting $60 for writing a book report. When you write a book report, it's show and tell, basically. It's convincing somebody of something. Learning how to teach is learning how to learn. If you have friends who don't understand the games that their kids are playing, say, hey, ask your kid to teach it to you. Sit down with them, pay attention to what they're into, have them teach you how to play the game. Check your timing. I had a mom who did not understand why her son was playing Minecraft, maybe, and her son was making Let's Play videos for Minecraft. And she said, I don't understand Minecraft, I don't know what's going on, I don't even know how to learn about it. And my comment was, your son's making videos of how to learn about Minecraft. Why don't you ask to watch one of them with him and you can talk about it?
How did she respond to that feedback?
Please.
No, how did she respond?
Oh, yeah, it never occurred to her. I didn't see her again. And as psychologists, we work ourselves out of a job, so if they don't come back to see me, either they got much worse or they got lost. So, 2 of these I personally believe. I think arrows up there to help you. But this is the kind of thing that you're going to be up against. This is an actual poll that was done. 4% of the United States believes that lizard people control policy. Yeah, that's one that I believe, because clearly that's true. But this was done, it's a great study methodologically, it's very sound. They actually break this data down a little bit further, but this is the aggregated. This is what you're up against. If you hear that video games are bad for you and you're not a good consumer of that information, wouldn't you believe it? People on TV are telling you. I find this study hilarious and also pretty sad. So I'm going to read this. I generally don't like to read straight off of the slide, but I want to read this to you. So this is a quote. The world is passing through troubled times. The young people of today think nothing of themselves. They have no reverence for parents or old age. They are impatient and lack all restraint. They talk as if they know everything, and what passes for wisdom with us is foolishness with them. As for the girls, they are forward, immodest, and unladylike in speech, behavior, and dress. Right? Somebody said that last week. Yeah. Somebody said that 10 years ago. Somebody said it 20 years ago. Somebody said it 100 years ago. Peter the Hermit said it 800 years ago. Can you imagine how awesome people were if we currently are 800 years of this type of de-evolution? Nothing new under the sun. Video games aren't a medicine. They're not toxic. They're just how you use it. And I'm excited to have this chance to talk with you because I want you guys to all go out and have these conversations and convince people that gaming is not good. It's not bad. It's just how we decide to approach it in our life. So I think, yeah.
So we're going to have them put up the microphone for questions because we could sit up here and talk about this stuff all day. This is what we're passionate about. But since you all are here at dinner time, I'm guessing you're passionate about it too. So we want to be able to have conversations and dialogue about what you guys are specifically interested in, the questions that you guys have. So we want to start queuing. And then for those who might not know, on the top here, is anybody here familiar with the Take This AFK room here at PAX? Not nearly enough. Okay, so right by the Bumblebee Theater, which is on the 3rd floor, there is a room called the AFK room. It's staffed by therapists and mental health professionals, and it's a quiet, safe space to go. So if you're in the con and you're feeling stressed, you're feeling overwhelmed, or you just need to sit down and not have people touch you on the show floor for a while, yeah, you can go there. And again, it's staffed by mental health clinicians. If you just have questions or you want some more information, they're there. That's what they do. That's their mission. You can follow them on Twitter at Take This. Fantastic. And on the very bottom, a friend of mine from Geek Counseling, I don't know if you saw him, he's right by the entrance to the expo hall when you come in the front doors. They're actually doing research on gamers, and he's very pro-gamer, so it's not like, oh, you guys are all crazy, evil, horrible. They're really trying to find out, what brings people to conventions and what makes us different and special that we're here versus people who aren't. So shout out to both of these amazing things that you can do at PAX that if you haven't done them, I really encourage you to go check them out for science and for your own health. All right, and our first question.
Yeah, it kind of seems to me that a lot of the information that we can use to maybe inform people who don't understand games, a lot of it doesn't seem to be easily accessible. If you're not a student in college or have $1,000 a year to start an academic journal, it becomes very difficult to get in there for use.
That is a good point.
Yeah. So part of it is, the question I think was centered on how do you get this kind of information? Like how do you discover the kinds of research and information that you can arm yourself with on the benefits of playing games? So much of the average person has access to essentially news media to kind of find out that information. My recommendation is usually to find blogs and podcasts that kind of center on this kind of thing because they're gonna pass that information along on I think a bit more unfiltered or with a different kind of agenda or different focus. So our fourth person who's supposed to be here today, who again is very ill, Josue Cardona, he runs geektherapy.com, and he has a great podcast that where each episode is about an hour, and he interviews mental health clinicians, sometimes people who have used geek culture themselves, like as clients in therapy, or teachers, people who use geek culture in some kind of interesting way to help oneself. And he always is excellent about putting publicly accessible links to any studies that were ever mentioned in that episode of the podcast. So again, it's geektherapy.com. So just kind of looking for blogs and other kind of alternative media sources that cover this kind of information can often help you discover that information and arm you with it.
So I just want to point to my Twitter right there, the @Donna. I do that all the time. Take down research, translate it from psychobabble into human speech. And there's a blog as well. This way, we just mentioned, and I also have a podcast called Psych Tech, and it is all about the intersection of psychology and technology, whether it's a self-driving car or video games or anything else. So, but it's also on us as people who are in the field to come to places like this and speak to people like you and have a presence online. So please feel free to follow us, message us, and we will continue to try to evangelize for freedom.
And what I would add to that really quick is that beliefs are very fact resistant. But what beliefs are not is experience resistant. And so more than just sharing information, share experiences with people.
If people were convinced by PAX, we would not be thinking vaccines cause autism. I have a two-point question. One, I work in mental health. I'm from Canada, so I don't work in the same system that you guys do. But we have some pretty big institutions with a lot of money that are very determined to convince everybody that games are equal to gambling. And they put out really stigmatizing and terrible resources, and then they wonder why young people aren't coming to them. So as a person working in this field, what do I do? Because I've told them several times that they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's like you said, it's not inherently good, it's not inherently bad, but I don't want them to alienate an entire group of people by getting these parents who have the story of somebody never leaves their basements for 2 weeks and blame the video game rather than actually have a conversation with their kid.
That's a good question. And what can you do? You brought up the vaccine issue. There's good information and there's bad information. The information we tend to see is the information that we agree with. The information we disagree with is easy to discount. And all I can say about that is I would spend as much time as you can sharing with them the fact that it's not bad, it's not good, it's just, it's just an activity. And there are certainly people with agendas, but that's true of everything. Give some examples of other agendas. Kelly's slides in the beginning, those were all, there were people saying, how can I convince my patients that wrestling lions is bad? That's probably not a good example.
It's also important to keep in mind, mental health professionals, we tend to try and save the world. We try and really take that mantle onto ourselves. So also keeping in mind for your own self-care that there's only so much you can do. So do what you can, advocate as you can, be who you want to be, and share the information that you have. But at the end of the day, you do what you can. I guess is the best way to say it.
I guess my second question is that I go to a lot of systems change events, and apologies for anyone in the room who doesn't understand what that means. And anytime I bring up the idea of gamers and trying to engage gamers, I always have a whole bunch of gamers coming up to me and talking to me about it. So what can we do better to make sure that gamers feel safe and part of this conversation? Because I feel like as mental health professionals, because we've equated gaming and gambling and video games for so long, they just don't feel safe in our space.
Yeah, I had an experience when I was in grad school where I was working my dissertation, which was on mental health and video games, and I put up this slide of, this person played 42 consecutive days of Halo 2. So I asked my cohort, what do you think about this person? They played 40 hours over a 3-day weekend, 42 consecutive days of Halo 2. They probably have no social life, and they probably have really bad grades, and they probably are fat and have acne. And I was like, those are my stats. But even in an academic setting where we're trying to make change, there is still a huge stigma against what we do. So again, it's just putting yourself out there and fighting the stigma by just being awesome and being you. And if you feel you've got a point of view and you've got the data to back it up, start a blog, share business cards, just get out there what you can do, and that's as much as you can do.
Comic book movies, Game of Thrones, Walking Dead. There was some applause for my Ultima 3 picture. If I had said I liked those things back when I was 10 or 11, I would not beat up, because I'm a big guy, but I wouldn't have shared that information. Now you can't go anywhere without hearing people talk about Game of Thrones. It's awesome that we stewarded that cultural information for so long, and it's getting more accepted. I think it's a lot better than it used to be.
my question is regarding how temporary this view of video games is going to be. I don't know, fun little trivia fact, the first piece of cinema ever created was of a man sneezing. And yet, nowadays, cinema is one of the greatest artworks that we have. You can take that, you can write that down if you want, but take it or leave it. But everything has to start somewhere, and I think that video games, at the moment, they're just reaching what I like to think of as like similar to adulthood. They're young adults right now, and like I think that's they came out in like the 70s, like late 70s, early 80s. So yeah, they would be young or adults, young adults. So do you think that this issue is going to really persist for much longer?
I don't, mostly just because of what I said at the beginning, is that everything new is scary, but eventually what is new becomes old, and so it's no longer scary. I think what you're going to see is an evolution of video games that are on your console. Okay, well that's not bad. Now this Oculus Rift thing, now we're going to talk about that. This HoloLens thing, this going onto the holodeck and absconding for ages while you're on the Enterprise. There's always going to be something new to point the finger at. You know, comic books, rap music, television, The Simpsons. You know, there's all these things, and over time we just kind of like, okay, maybe that wasn't so bad. And so there's always going to be a thing, but I don't think it's always going to be video games that's the thing.
You just need new media, essentially, something else. Whether it's like music goo you inject in your ears or something, that's going to be then the devil's, whatever. Oh my God, they're injecting music into their ears. Now video games won't get any of that attention anymore.
Music goo.
Music goo.
Another good band.
Yeah, what's the name of the album?
Oh, right, Hypnotic Voodoo Rhythm.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. So, you may know this already, Kelly, but I'm a grad student in clinical psych, and I was kind of wondering, like, how do you guys create rapport, but also maintain boundaries between clients when you bring up that you do play video games, or?
Yeah, I think this kind of comes back to an earlier question too, is that I try to make, I would make my office, I'm into comic books and video games, and I would make it a safe space for geeks, essentially, by putting up superhero art, or I had a wall decal of 8-bit Mario that would jump over my clock. So anytime you look at the clock, there's going to be a reminder of like you're in a gamer safe space, essentially. So I think that could be is essentially a very good kind of first step is the way you kind of present yourself and your space that you occupy 8 hours a day or so is going to be felt by the people who spend 1 hour to do that day.
I'm certainly, I use video games. You know that Staples easy button? That's what video games are for. Especially when you're working with kids. It's an easy button to